How are we going to engage millennials in Jewish life? This is the $1 billion question. And I have an idea. Well, I have a question. I have a lot of questions. But let me back up for a minute. Last Sunday, I was folding my laundry and listening to NPR, and my favorite show was playing, On Being with Krista Tippett. She was rebroadcasting an interview with Dr. Sherwin Nuland. Dr. Nuland had passed away just earlier that week at the age of 83. He was a professor of clinical surgery at Yale University, a bioethicist, and also someone who had written both about biology and faith. I stopped folding when I heard him say, "Wonder is something that I share with people of great faith." I love that idea. I love the combination of science and wonder, of bioethics and curiosity. I thought about what kind of humility would be required for someone like him with that much wisdom to still maintain that sense of wonder. And what if we applied that as we are thinking about how we engage Jews in our community, millennials or anyone else? What kinds of questions would that lead us to ask? I don't assume that people are necessarily so mysterious or that they shield themselves from people that are important. I think we just rely on our assumptions. We have a clear sense of what's important to us, and we just kind of assume it's important for others too. I think we don't ask. And I'd like us to ask more. That's the first step. The second step is actually to trust the responses that we get when we ask. I realize curiosity can mean a lot of different things to different people, and sometimes it's a real challenge and practice that we need to work on. Sometimes curiosity has a particular image in mind, like making trouble. Let's take Curious George. He makes me smile too. He's this childlike monkey who explores everything. He's very willing to take risks. He is not at all concerned about danger. He leaps off boats trying to fly like a seagull, and we are the audience, we know he's going to be okay, first of all, because there's the man with the yellow hat who's there to catch him. It's also a story, so we can put it together in context, but it reminds us a bit of our own childhood when we were trying to figure out how things work and how we had that freedom to explore. Because now as grown-ups, we tend to avoid taking such risks and leaps. We have a greater sense of what it takes to avoid danger, and we intend to do that sometimes more than just try something new. Falling into the water like a seagull because you're a monkey is embarrassing, and there's not always that man there for us. So I'm not saying that being like Curious George is necessarily the way we all want to be. You don't want to be rescued all the time. But I would also say that maybe making trouble is not so bad. The kind of curiosity that I am really thinking about, though, is the kind that leads to wonder. Wonder that opens us up to appreciate the sanctity of life, that allows us to be our best selves because it means we have to withhold judgment and actually engage with others who may be just like us or may be quite different. And what I like about this is how much practice it takes and how difficult it is, and so what happens if we bring that in? Curiosity has been part of the Jewish conversation since, well, the beginning. In Bereshit, God creates the earth, day and night, and sky and ground and trees and fish and us, everything. And then God creates Eden, this whole magnificent world, and inserts Adam and then Eve, without a whole lot of instructions. Some things to keep your hands off of, but it's rather tantalizing, right? The only thing that Adam and Eve have is this sense of curiosity. And in a very short time, through asking and pushing boundaries, they learn so much so quickly that they're expelled, or maybe they've graduated. One possibility is that in this case, curiosity killed the cat, and the other is that curiosity opened the whole world. Clearly, once Adam and Eve were no longer living in the garden, life was harder and shorter. But I also think that we have to give them credit for actually using their curiosity and moving the human race forward. So a big shout out to Eve and Adam. Curiosity comes not just from our biblical texts, but even from Jewish culture. We all know you answer a question with a question. We have rituals that are actually based around questions. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. That question about how is this night different from all others, a whole ritual, a Seder, is based right around that. I love this idea. I'm a person who asks questions. I always have been. I was that kid like this with my hand up, not because I had the answer, but because I wanted to ask the next question as quickly as I could. I frequently have to restrain myself from interrupting with another question when someone is talking. Maybe this is why I love Judaism so much, because in our heritage, we value open-mindedness. Rabbi Noah Kushner reminded me of the verse in Exodus where Moses stumbles across the burning bush. He stops, he looks, and he asks, Madua? Why isn't this burning up? It was an amazing childlike curiosity that stopped. He didn't dismiss it as a mirage in the desert heat. And by doing so, he passed the test, the ultimate one-question interview. God needed to know if Moses is really the one who could actually lead his people out of slavery. And where everyone else saw a narrow place and impassable darkness, Moses could see that maybe there's another possibility. When we incorporate that kind of wonder into our lives, we stop and we look. And we can see bushes that are burning but not being consumed. And we can see the first flowers of spring. And we can see that sly smile or quiet wink. And we can possibly see how people are making meaning for themselves. About 13 years ago, I joined with Anita Diamond and a small but powerful group of women in Boston who were fascinated by this notion of meaning making and trying to figure out how could we maybe rethink this one particular ritual of mikvah. Now, to be sure, most people were not walking around the street saying, you know what I want? A mikvah. That's what I need. So that meant we had to take this vision of the notion of a place that could eventually become Mayyim, Hayyim, living waters, community mikveh, and education center, a place that was inclusive and welcoming and accessible and deeply personal and hopefully so meaningful that you felt like you belonged. How do we get that from the vision to actually a whole community saying we should raise money, we should invest, we should be part? We started asking questions. What was meaningful to people? What were the moments in their lives that were transitions that they were marking? And how might they do it? Are they using Judaism to do that? Are they going to another tradition? Where are they finding those resources? We learned from some that they needed a place to honor conversion to Judaism, or they wanted to celebrate becoming a bride or groom, or they wanted to sanctify an intimate relationship with their partner. Traditional purposes for mikvah. Then we also learned that people started thinking about moments in their lives that didn't necessarily match up with a ritual, but they were very significant. One woman said, I know that soon I'm going to be ready to take off my wedding ring and move on after the death of my husband. That was a moment I'll never forget, and not one that had a clear prescription for a ritual. But she was now imagining that that's so significant, I need to mark it, and I want to do it in a way that is part of my Jewish tradition. How might I do that? Our second round of questions, well, when you tried marking things in the past, did it work? What were your barriers? What was successful? What do you need? And we found that in some cases, they might have gone to a mikveh and not been welcomed or felt honored, or they might have had a life cycle celebration and it fell flat, or there was a significant transition, but it just passed them by. It was a missed opportunity. So now we had a design challenge. How to create a space where people could come in and feel like, this is what I needed. I did need a mikvah. So we created a space where when anybody who walks in is immediately reflected by the person who's caring for her or for him. There's a volunteer who literally guides you through the process. Every step is informed and optional. Nothing is inscribed in the wall, not one blessing, because that might imply there's a right way to do this, and we want people to have that control and authority. And what we learned is that the more elastic we got, the more people started being curious about how they might integrate this into their own lives. And more ideas started happening. So as the executive director of Mayyim Hayyim, I was pretty proud of our ability to be so inclusive and welcoming and meet so many people's needs. I was also kind of a walking litmus test. So people who I barely knew used to come up to me and say, oh, you're Aliza from Mayyim Hayyim? I hate mikvah. Okay. It took me a little back because I often got praise when they said that, but instead, My response was, okay, that's all right. I'm not here to evangelize or persuade. You're entitled to your opinion and your space. It's fine. Then I shared that with my friend and teacher, Dr. Erica Brown. And she, I think, gently rebuked me and said, Aliza, that was not a criticism. That was an invitation. This was an opportunity to engage with somebody who came up to me, and instead of asking Madua, why, and finding out more and talking with this person, I kind of took the easy way out. This is so difficult, what I'm asking us to do. Emotions get in the way and judgments get in the way, and what we're talking about is literally getting over that so that we can engage and not miss opportunities. So last year, when I discovered design thinking, which is a protocol for problem solving and product development and experience development that comes from those geniuses in Silicon Valley, I was relieved because this is a process that actually builds in curiosity. It's part of the process. So if I have a protocol to follow, I can do that. And while it's an iterative process, it begins with empathy. So that means before I start to solve a problem, I have to understand the needs of the population that I'm actually trying to solve for. So if we go back to our millennials for a second, we know that there are institutions that we have cared for deeply that do not resonate with this population. We know that the notion, in fact, of commitment and obligation is not appealing. Adventure and doing things for the first time is. But so is making the world better and making a difference. And so is making meaning in your own life. So part of our challenge is, how does Judaism fit in so that we're actually part more intuitively of this meaning making? So I've just started a new initiative. It was envisioned and is funded by the Steinhardt Foundation for Jewish Life and the Paul E. Singer Foundation. And the idea is, how do we start with one ritual that happens every single week as an opportunity? It should be so good. Let's start with Shabbat dinner. You do it in your home, and we're imagining thousands of people with their peers as the hosts. And the dinner is great, the food is delicious, the wine is flowing, and there is clear intention of kedusha, of holiness, of separateness. This is not Tuesday night, this is Friday, and this is a dinner party that's elevated to Shabbat. If we're successful, it's so good that the guests at the table want to become hosts. And they feel like, oh, how might I do this? Who would I invite? How would I make this reflect my own personality and style? We got full of all kinds of ideas and how people have needs, and we're going to provide their, with Jewish ritual, we can meet those needs. So I was sharing this vision and this empathy, and I was on a Google Hangout with a 28-year-old, and I was proud of my technological prowess and my empathy and vision, and I shared this with her. It was 2 weeks on the job. She said, say it again. And I told her about millennials are seeking meaning, and this is going to provide it. And she's like, I have meaning in my life. I did it again, right? I completely thought about what was meaningful to me and so focused on my work that I forgot to ask her. Here was another opportunity, not to just share my thoughts, but to find out, what does meaning look like for her? What does the rest look like? What does unplugging look like for her? All of these things that I was not asking but assuming. And she completely called me on it and has reshaped how I'm facing this entire new job that I have, right? What are the questions I need to ask? What's important to people? How do we observe? How do we learn? The beauty of design thinking is that you can have an assumption like that. You can even call it an insight. You write it on a Post-it, and you put the Post-it on the wall. And then you let go of it. It's not going anywhere. It's on a Post-it. It's on the wall. But now I can free myself and actually pay attention to the people I'm speaking to and engage with them more thoroughly and start observing. Because maybe the ultimate design challenge is not to just maintain my own curiosity, but figure out how I inspire curiosity in others. And how do I ask and talk? And then once we have an idea that we think, maybe this will work, we prototype, we try it out. And when it doesn't stick, we have to ask, why? And start again. And we go through this process. And I believe that the process of being genuinely curious in others can lead to them being also curious. So let's imagine a whole generation of Jews and their friends and partners in their 20s and 30s saying, Madua, why should I incorporate Jewish values and practice into my life? What would it look like if I tapped my network to explore Shabbat practice in different groups? How might I personalize this ritual so that it reflects my individuality? I may be making an assumption, but I actually believe that given the space, people will ask those questions. And I think it's time to start backing up and doing that. My last quote is not from the Bible, but I think it's smile-worthy nonetheless. Eleanor Roosevelt suggests, I think at a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift should be curiosity. So how are we going to engage millennials in Jewish life? Such a good question. I don't pretend to have the answer, but I do believe that if we approach it through the stance of curiosity, we're going to come up with answers that are actually much more resonant, much more humble, and much more that fit into the lives of the millennials. So now it's your turn. I invite you to start asking. You can start with, what are you passionate about? Or what inspires you? You can ask tonight during a break. You can ask on your way home. You can incorporate it in your meetings with your colleagues or your students or your board members. Just ask. And then, after they've answered the first question, see if you can find out why. Go deep. You might get into trouble. You'll definitely learn something new.